Hello and welcome. If you want to learn how to stay healthy, both mentally and physically, make sure to subscribe and smash that like button. It tells YouTube that you enjoy the content and helps our community grow. There is a silent condition that shortens life expectancy more effectively than smoking a pack of cigarettes a day or struggling with severe obesity. Yet it rarely appears on a doctor's chart or in a medical diagnosis. It is not a virus, it is not a bacteria, and it is not a genetic defect that you were born with. But if you ignore the symptoms, the statistical probability of you living a long and vibrant life drops continuously. We spend billions of dollars every year trying to fix our hearts, our lungs, and our cholesterol levels, but we often completely neglect the invisible ecosystem that actually keeps us alive. Scientists and researchers have found that people who fall into this specific behavioral trap increase their risk of early mortality by nearly 50%, a number that should honestly terrify anyone who plans on being around for their grandchildren. The frightening reality is that you might be developing this condition right now, day by day, habit by habit, without even realizing that you are slowly cutting the lifeline that keeps you tethered to a healthy existence. Today, we're going to talk about the health of your relationships and the subtle, often unnoticed behavioral habits that destroy them, because social isolation is physically toxic to the human body. This text is not about how to be popular or how to win friends, but rather it is a strict prescription for survival, focusing on how to eliminate the 13 toxic behaviors that push people away and leave you stranded in a state of chronic stress and loneliness. We are going to explore how things like constant complaining, rigid thinking, and emotional stagnation actually trigger inflammatory responses in your body and accelerate the aging process. Please make sure you stay with me until the very end of this lecture, because I have saved a truly fascinating, perhaps even shocking fact about the #1 predictor of longevity that will completely change how you view your daily interactions. Let us begin by looking at the energy you bring into a room, which acts very much like a contagion. As we age, it is an undeniable biological fact that we experience more pain, more stiffness, and more systemic issues, and the natural reaction is to vocalize this discomfort. However, from a neurological perspective, constant complaining creates a feedback loop in the brain that actually heightens your perception of pain and stress. When you constantly vocalize negativity, whether it is about the government, the weather, or your aching knees, you are flooding your system with cortisol, the stress hormone. Imagine your friend Helen, the one mentioned in the source material, who only talks about her neighbors and her ailments. When you engage in this behavior, you are not just annoying others, you are physically draining the people around you, triggering their fight or flight response, which makes them want to flee from your presence to protect their own energy. This leads us directly into the trap of medicalizing your entire identity. It is perfectly normal to have health issues like arthritis or high blood pressure, but when your conversations are exclusively about your symptoms, medications, and doctor visits, you cease to be a person and you become a walking medical file. This is dangerous for your health because it reinforces a psychological state of illness rather than wellness. You are signaling to your brain that you are nothing more than a collection of broken parts. Think about the granddaughter mentioned in our stories who stopped visiting because every interaction was a review of medications. That isolation is a health risk for you. When people stop visiting, you lose the oxytocin boost, the love hormone, that you get from a simple hug or a laugh. And that lack of oxytocin weakens your immune system and your heart health. Now, consider the rigidity of the mind, which is just as dangerous as the hardening of the arteries. As we accumulate decades of experience, we often calcify our opinions, believing that because we have lived through wars and disasters, our way is the only way. This cognitive inflexibility is a marker of an aging brain that has stopped growing. When you engage in conversations as battles to be won, enforcing your worldview on your children or neighbors, you're creating a high-conflict environment that spikes your blood pressure and keeps you in a state of agitation. It is ironic that we think we're teaching others, like the father who constantly corrected his daughter's parenting, but in reality, we're just building a wall of stress that blocks human connection. Before we go deeper into the hygiene of the mind and body, I want to take a brief moment to ask you to do something for your own digital health. If you are finding value in this analysis and want to understand more about how your behavior influences your longevity, please consider subscribing to the channel and liking this video. It is a small gesture, like saying hello to a neighbor, that helps us keep this community growing and healthy. Thank you for that. Let's move on to a sensitive but critical topic: the physical neglect that often accompanies emotional decline. Neglecting personal hygiene is often a symptom of depression or cognitive decline, but it is also a massive social barrier that isolates you further. It is not just about smell or appearance, it's about dignity and the signal you send to the tribe. In our evolutionary past, if a tribe member stopped caring for themselves, it was a signal of withdrawal. When you ensure you are clean, dressed, and presentable, you are telling your brain that you matter, that you are still a participant in the game of life. This self-respect lowers depression rates and invites people closer, which in turn reduces the risks associated with isolation. We must also address the dangerous habit of living entirely in the past, which is effectively a refusal to engage with the present reality. While reminiscence therapy can be beneficial, getting stuck in a loop of how things used to be causes your brain to atrophy because it is no longer being challenged by new information. Your brain is like a muscle. If you only lift the weights you lifted 40 years ago, you will not get stronger. By refusing to adapt to new technologies or refusing to understand the culture of younger generations, you are voluntarily shrinking your world. The woman who learned to use a computer to play chess with her nephew is the perfect example of neuroplasticity in action. She forced her brain to build new neural pathways, which is the best defense we have against dementia and cognitive decline. This connects closely with the habit of criticizing younger generations, which creates an unnecessary generational divide. "Kids these days" is a phrase that has been spoken for thousands of years, yet every time you say it, you sever a connection to the vitality of youth. Interacting with younger people, grandchildren, mentees, younger neighbors, has been shown to improve the cognitive function and emotional well-being of the elderly. When you criticize their phones, their clothes, or their speed, you are cutting yourself off from a source of energy and new ideas. Instead of being the grumpy elder, try to be the curious observer. It keeps your mind sharp and your social calendar full, which is vital for your survival. Another massive stressor that ruins health in old age is the need for control, particularly financial control or meddling in the lives of others. Money and advice, when used as weapons or leashes, create a toxic dynamic of obligation rather than love. If you give money with strings attached, or if you offer unsolicited advice constantly, you are operating from a place of anxiety. You are afraid of becoming irrelevant, so you try to force relevance through control. This anxiety keeps your cortisol levels permanently elevated. Letting go, practicing non-judgment, and trusting others to live their lives is not just a kindness to them, it is a massive relief for your own heart. It allows your nervous system to down-regulate from a state of alert to a state of rest. We also see a profound health deterioration in those who play the victim. The mindset of "nobody calls me" or "my children don't care" is a self-fulfilling prophecy that leads to severe depression. This passive-aggressive stance creates a chemical bath of misery in your brain. Taking agency, being the one to make the call, being the one to send the card, shifts you from a passive victim to an active participant. Active participation is correlated with better immune function. Similarly, refusing help is a form of pride that can lead to physical injury and emotional distance. When you allow someone to help you with groceries or a ride, you are not just getting a task done, you are allowing a bonding hormone exchange to happen between you and the helper. Finally, we cannot ignore the importance of humor. Losing your sense of humor is essentially losing your resilience. Laughter lowers blood pressure, massages the internal organs, and releases endorphins that act as natural painkillers. If you take everything seriously, if you cannot laugh at the absurdity of aging, the aches and the pains, you become brittle. The woman who joked that she was wrinkled but spicy was doing more for her cardiovascular health in that moment than she would have by sitting in silence and worrying. To bring this all together, you must understand that your personality and your habits are the gatekeepers of your health. If you push people away through complaining, rigidity, poor hygiene, or criticism, you are sentencing yourself to the health risks of solitary confinement. But if you cultivate curiosity, kindness, adaptability, and humor, you are building a fortress of immunity around yourself. You do not have to change everything overnight, but recognize that every time you choose to listen instead of correct, or smile instead of complain, you are literally adding minutes to your life. And now for that surprising fact I promised you at the beginning. There is a famous study known as the Roseto Effect. In a small town in Pennsylvania, researchers found that the local community had nearly 0 heart attacks and lived significantly longer than anyone else in the surrounding areas, despite smoking, eating meatballs fried in lard, and working in hazardous mines. The doctors were baffled. It wasn't their diet, it wasn't their exercise, and it wasn't their genetics. It was their social structure. They stopped to chat on the street, they cooked for each other, and 3 generations lived under one roof. The scientific conclusion was that loneliness can kill you faster than a bad diet, and community can save you even when your physical habits aren't perfect. So, the healthiest thing you can do today isn't just eating an apple, it is calling a friend and asking them about their day without complaining about yours.